All right, guys, pleasure to meet everyone. Today is a great webinar organized by Dennis and his community Ask.vc, and it's going in partnership with Go Global World. He managed to invite awesome people from around the world, like really from many continents right now on the call with us. I will have a few words about the community and some updates for it. The Go Global World community is created specifically for entrepreneurs. It's a free community, and this is where we expect entrepreneurs help each other to go global. Uh, uh, we already have a team of about 37 people in 30 countries that are willing to help you access those markets faster and preferably at no cost at all. We also have amazing speakers and webinars, and sometime in future, I'm sure we'll have a webinar with Dennis, because he's a brilliant and smart investor who can share lots of brilliant insights. In upcoming webinars we will have this week, like tomorrow, we will have a speaker, Hannah Brown. She will talk about e-residency in Estonia and how to get access to EU market. We also have networking sessions like for Russian founders globally and for founders from around the world. We meet and in order for us to connect and help each other. We also would have a great speaker, Derek Distenfield. He will talk about Silicon Valley and his life stories. And there will be a webinar in Russian, how to access global markets and win the world by Nikolai Khmelnytsky. We also have our webinar, our Eventbrite page. This is how you can access it, or just find Go Global World. This is our partners. And this is our website, goglobal.world. And if you would like to have more information, just write us a message in our Go Global World community. That's it. I would like to say that Denise, I met Denise quite a while ago, but not too long ago, like 6 or 7 months ago, I'm not sure. And he always was a very a knowledgeable speaker who was running lots of great events for founders to start and build their companies. I'm sure what he organized, this panel will be super valuable for founders, and I'm excited actually to have been invited by Denise and share this expertise together with you guys. All right, I pass this word to Dennis. Dennis, please continue and introduce the speakers.
Yeah, Daniel, thanks for that you join us today. My name is Dennis Kalishkin. I'm venture capitalist. I work at ITBF Global Ventures, and I'm an expert in so-called Industry 4.0, digital transformation, transforming boring and unsexy industries with some frontier tech. So I've seen quite an unusual things in various verticals. And I like to share the knowledge I gained over these years and helps entrepreneurs to avoid some basic mistakes, because entrepreneurship is a tough journey actually, and you anyway do mistakes. Make sure that you do not do very basic mistakes. Yeah, and the idea of today's conversation discussion is that in many countries outside the US, there are problems that the VC ecosystem underdeveloped, startups are underfunded, and oftentimes even the local market is not that big in terms of the potential total addressable market to be quite a big companies. So I see sometimes entrepreneurs are a little bit confused and thinking what should I do, how should I deal with this. So that's why I invited experts from various countries, and actually from different continents. In each case the country has less than 12 million people population, so the local market is small, and I see that there are ecosystem emerging. So I will introduce, maybe we'll do the following. I'll introduce a speaker. You guys all give a quick intro about yourself and tell a little bit about your local ecosystem, so that it's, so that not frustrate our discussion. So maybe Claudia, we can start with you. So introduce yourself, tell us how you work with startups, and tell about ecosystem in Africa. What's curious about this continent?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Claudia Macadristo, and I'm the regional manager for SeedStars in Africa. I'm originally from Angola and the Netherlands, but for the past 5 years, I've been working across about 25 countries in sub-Saharan Africa each year, essentially to scout for the best entrepreneurs in tech on the continent. So I do that for a company called SeedStars. So in very short, SeedStars is one of the biggest entrepreneurship education companies, specifically specialized and focused on emerging markets. And on the other hand, we're also very active impact investors. And we also do have a network of about 3,000 investors globally that we support in actually doing investments across different emerging markets. So that would be a very short introduction of who I am and what SeedStars does. So I think, in essence, Africa is quite interesting, right? I think a lot of people, I think globally, are now aware of this huge continent where, it is a bit tricky, right? So from an investment point of view, it is said that Africa, for many people, is seen as the next big thing, but it's also at the same time extremely risky. So I think a lot of investors are currently at a stage where they're in between, should I invest and risk losing it all? But what if I don't invest at all and I miss out on this big opportunity? So we do see more and more local and international investors actually looking towards investment opportunities in Africa. I think the first challenge that we have, of course, is how I actually started myself with almost addressing Africa as if it were to be this one big market. So we're talking about 54 countries in total. Some of them that represent huge populations, but actually when you start zooming in, you'll even find that in the biggest markets, the markets tend to be highly fragmented and saturated. So a place such as Nigeria with hundreds of millions of people, that sounds very attractive for any startup in Africa or abroad, which is what we consider part of the usual suspects. When you actually get into the market and start building your business, you start to realize very soon that this big market is actually broken down in a lot of very difficult to access and navigate markets in itself. So I would say that, overall, and I'm not talking on a specific country, but there's a lot of growth that has been happening. I think ecosystem wise, compared to some other emerging markets and of course developed markets, we still had a lot of room to grow. But there's a lot of very interesting opportunities, I would say, if you know how to navigate it, which is probably the trickiest in Africa. It's not so much whether a solution works, but how to make it work in such a difficult and complex environment, whether that is in a bigger ecosystem or a smaller one.
Okay, thanks. It's really interesting because you don't often hear a lot about what's happening in Africa. And actually, my first experience with African startups was last year at Viva Technology in France. So I see that historically France has a lot of business with Africa, and I've seen quite a lot of interest. I've met quite a lot of interesting founders from various countries. So that's what drew my attention, and I also draw attention of our participants to look for this opportunity. Yeah. So maybe David, could you share could you introduce yourself and share your experience working in Chile, because Startup Chile is quite a it's one of the top global accelerators in the world, and they for around 10 years or so they were building an ecosystem there, and building like a window of opportunity to tap into Latin American market. So David.
Sure. Thank you very much, all of you, for the invitation of being part of this panel and discussion. My name is David. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Startup Chile. Startup Chile, it's a specific organization that it was born inside of the Chilean government, so which means that we are a 100% public organization. That we are supporting startups to grow and to use Chile as a platform to deliver technology to the whole world. We were created back in 2010 with the objective of creating a hub in Latin America, because as you know, most of the part of Latin America, Chile is a really small country in the south part of America, but Latin America itself is more than 650 million people living here. So we thought, what if we can attract people to use Chile as a platform to grow to the whole world, but let's try to focus on Latin America, and that's what we're doing here. We have funded already more than 2,000 startups so far from 85 different countries, and we are attracting them all to use Chile as a platform. They need to come to be part of these specific programs, and we will support them to grow and to find some connection, commercial contacts, and of course to grow their own business and technology, and then help them in the growth process. Yeah, we're a public policy, which means that we might look for different interests. Of course, we believe a lot in technology, and we think that the entrepreneurs, they have a lot of positive impact in our country, but that's what we're looking. We're looking for employment. We're looking for attraction of the investment to our country. We're looking for new technology to be available to improve the quality of life of the Latin American countries. And of course, that we're looking to have a positive impact in the local economy. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. Thank you for the invitation. I will be more than happy to share all the outcomes and the learning that we have had in this specific program. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, and David, so a couple of words, how the ecosystem in your country look like? Because I know that you guys are sourcing startups across the globe, and the local market is small. So maybe a few words, what are the countries startups are coming from, and what countries are they attacking, and how big in general, you know, the ecosystem, how many startups there? So just a couple of ideas, how
Sure.
is it different?
Startup Chile was created inside of a big organization that is called Corfo, and we are supporting the creation and development of the whole startups and innovation ecosystem in the country, which means that in our side, we are supporting the acceleration process of a lot of startups, not just from Chile, but from all over the world. And as I told before, we have been part of the supporting process of more than 2,000 startups so far. But that's not just that's not all, right? Just in Corfu, we had, like previous years, the goal of supporting 1,000 startups per year, different startups, right? So that was the idea of supporting the whole ecosystem. But the ecosystem is not just formed by startups. We needed to have VCs and investors. So we launched as Corfu a matching fund of attracting VC funds per dollar that we're investing. We have programs that we can put $1 additional, $2 additional, or $3 additional in the public investment per dollar invested in the private sector. So we are also supporting the investment part, of course, with all the deal flow that I told you already of the startups, but also supporting the creation of more VC funds. And that's not just enough, because we need to create even more technology. So we have another part trying to launch Chilean technology to a market as fast as they can. So I think it's the whole consistent public policies that they're supporting this specific topic that Corfu and the Chilean government had like in the previous I would like to say 15 years or more, right? That's why now we can talk about Chile as a hub in Latin America, and this specific program, which is quite well known in all over the world, but it's a consistent work in the ecosystem during several years. Of course, there's a lot of work to do. We are not the biggest ecosystem yet, and we need to keep on supporting startups, but we have seen really good examples and success cases that we need to follow that path.
Okay, thank you. Vlad, could you also introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, and sorry for my connection. It's really bad today. And yeah, I am a founder of Startech. It's a company, so we have the Accelerator innovation program for big corporates, but also we invest in a pre-seed stage startups. So here in Russia, we start with one of the biggest universities, MIPT, the best technical university in Russia. We start doing Accelerator in this field, but when we do our first batch, we find investors who say, oh, we like what you do. They give to us money to develop a ecosystem in Russia. And so we start doing programs with the biggest corporates in Russia. We do corporate accelerators. We're doing accelerators with universities. And we do a lot of international programs, because in Russia we own the brand Startup Bootcamp, and so we have we work also in Russia with international startups, but also we're starting doing venture builder. So we're working now with the biggest corporates, and we're doing a spin-off or startups with the corporates using their unfair advantages. And if we talk about Russian ecosystem, so it's not strong like in US, but in Russia there is a lot of technical entrepreneurs, really good founders who can do really great products. But first of all, we have a small market, and second, our entrepreneurs can't sell like it can some guys in US or in Europe. Yeah, so in Russia we have this. I don't know why we have it, but Russian entrepreneurs more technical guys than seller guys, and it's a little bit problem. But the most biggest problem is that we have not so big market, but our entrepreneurs think, oh, Russia, the biggest country, yeah. Big country in the map, so maybe we have a lot of money, and they think that they can work only in Russian market. They think only about Russian companies, and it's a really big problem because also everyone I think know that in Russia we have not so good like how to say polite. So you can't invest in Russian company if you are in I don't know, US fund and etc. So, but Russian startups, they don't understand that they should open company in US or in someone else, and they just want try work with Russian companies only in Russia. And this is really big problem, because if we want to, I mean, we like Russian ecosystem, if we want to grow our founders of startups, they need to think global, and we try to help them. And I know that a lot of our friends in the market try to do it also. For example, now we also would help some entrepreneurs go to the best US accelerators, and we have cases and with 5 kind of startups and YC and Plug and Play and Berkeley Skydeck and etc. And we really have cases. And also now we fundraise new funds to help entrepreneurs from our region to work in the US market, and we will invest in founders from our region to grow in US market or maybe in Europe market. So
okay, Yeah, but on the bright side, actually, I see more and more entrepreneurs from Russia and CIS attacking global markets and pursuing this way. So I believe that the paradigm is shifting, and we will see more. We actually already have companies which succeeded doing business in the US and Europe, but I believe we will have more such entrepreneurs in the coming years. So Vlad, thank you. Maybe Dmitry, could you also give a short intro about yourself and tell us about how the ecosystem looks like in Baltics and what problems entrepreneurs encounter?
Hi. Pleasure to meet you all. So my name is Mitra. I'm from Lithuania, by region, by nationality I'm Russian, but I born and live in Lithuania. So I believe that I can represent all Baltics ecosystem today, because it's even together like three countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, is kind of small market in general. So I work in Startup Wise Guys. I'm a fund manager and an investor in early stage startups, and I have a fund 8 million euros assets under management. We invest in B2b startups generally, because our markets do not produce a lot good B2C startups, like just because of the market limitations. The competence is also not here, but in terms of B2B, we're really good at building things. So Startup Wise Guys in Estonian accelerator and an investor. Last week we made the investment decision for fintech accelerator, and I think now our portfolio accounts for 200 startups in general. So in total, so it's kind of huge number. And I believe this number, even with the startup ecosystem counting for more than 2,000 startups in Baltics in total. So we should target a broader region. So we'll work a lot with the Central Eastern Europe market. So we target the Russian-speaking market a lot, meaning Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. We target Turkey. We target also a bit Italy and Spain now, and launching accelerator here. So it's kind of international organization with expertise in European Union market. We believe that that the main market where we can help startups scale is the European Union. So contrary to the let's say the main path of scaling to US from Russian-speaking market, we can help with the European Union market.
Yeah, thanks you for the elaborate introduction. Guy, maybe you could take the word next and introduce yourself.
Sure, as you say, Dennis, first of all, hi all, my name is Guy Zbarsky. Dennis, thank you very much for inviting. I live in Israel and I'm managing Sabra Capital fund, and basically in general about Israel, in few words, you know, Israel is one of the most active startup arenas in the globe. At every moment we have approximately 8,500 startups, and when I'm saying startups, I mean, like, you know, active startups, not kids with presentations, as we call it sometimes. I mean, you know, real startups with real people, MVP, product team, yada yada. We have about 368, if I'm not mistaken, venture funds here based in Israel. Some of biggest Silicon Valley funds have a branch here, starting from Lightspeed and Sequoia and Bessemer Partners and others. And basically our venture ecosystem is very rich, is very, you know, energetic, turbulent, and in terms of results, last year we had exits worth approximately $26 billion. And in terms of, for example, Nasdaq traded companies, we are second in the absolute amount, not per capita, absolute amount in measures of technological companies traded on Nasdaq after United States. And once again, for us, it's, you know, incredible achievements, because we are country that hardly has 9 million citizens. So that's briefly about Israel. And then in regards to myself, I previously had a startup that basically scaled from Israel to United States and Europe, KeepGo, and I will be more than happy and more than delighted to share from my personal experience how I did it, how I scaled from Israel to the other countries. It was a very interesting and I would say knowledgeable experience. And nowadays at Sabra Capital, what we do, we mostly represent funds, both corporate and private venture funds, in terms of their Israeli interest. As I mentioned before, big funds can allow having a local branch, but smaller funds and funds, they prefer to outsource local needs. They prefer to outsource their venture partner needs. So Sabra Capital, we represent different venture funds that are not located in Israel, but still interested in this turbulent and very rich Israeli startup ecosystem. So that's maybe briefly about us. And Dennis, the microphone goes back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Adam, maybe you also can add some additional points on the Israeli market, and especially given your more than 20-year entrepreneurial experience, right?
How old I am, guys. Okay, hello everybody. It's nice to see you. Danny, thank you for having me. Guy actually did a good job for me. Okay, he did a great job. He gave you a great overview about the Israeli market, and, which is really great. And the Israeli ecosystem is really growing and excellent. So I would like to say some words about me. I do have 20 years experience in IT. Okay, I started as an IT guy. And after that, I established my own IT business, which is called Union Group. It's still active, it works, okay? And we serve hundreds of clients in Israel and around the world. Since 2014, I'm acting as an angel investor, investing in really cool startups, okay? Just in the pre-seed stage, in the very early stage. And I'm mostly focusing, you know, it's opportunistic approach. So I'm mostly focusing on startups I like. Okay, people I like, products I like, okay? And that is very important for me. Except of the market and everything, I believe that every product today is good for the market. So if with the right team and with the right approach and everything, right? So, and recently I've joined as a partner in the CTO in Surround Ventures. Surround Ventures is a rather young Israeli-American investment fund. We invest in early startups, seed and A round. We're on the market for 9 months, something like that. So far we invested in 4 startups, Israeli startups. We have the special thing about Surround Ventures is that we have really star team, and our approach is that we can actually not only invest money in the startup, but we can significantly accelerate the startup business development and startup growth. We're not accelerator, by the way. We are like a full-scale investment fund, VC. But our team, we have a really dream team of, and you can go and see our website. Okay, it includes, by the way, Randy Zuckerberg, which is she's a sister of Mark. Okay, she's also a general partner in our fund. We have Robert Friedman, who has been CEO of AOL and the CEO of Warner Brothers. So we have a very good dream team that can actually promote startups significantly in US market. Okay, we're focusing on the media startups, we're focusing on the e-commerce, we're focusing on the cyber security. Okay, we're focusing on the startups when we can actually be very efficient and be very helpful in terms of the growth, especially in US market.
Thank you. I'll just maybe also you can also do a quick intro about yourself and your experience.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Olja Zienkulov, but please call me Oz. I'm based in Singapore. I'm the CEO of a company called Paradigm Capital. It is a traditional Singapore-based boutique fund management company. So we do a range of products starting from traditional income equity strategies all the way to private equity. But apart from that, we also deal in US secondaries under a strategy called Paradigm Ventures. But apart from being in Paradigm, I'm also a founder and principal at Tesla Capital. That's an early stage impact VC, also based out of Singapore. The mission behind Tesla is to support entrepreneurs from frontier economies or frontier technologies that lead to improvements in sustainability or market access. We have a range of portfolio companies. A lot of them are from Central Asia. So I think Denise has called me for that part of my expertise. My expertise lies in traditional finance as well as early stage VC, but I guess I can contribute quite a bit in terms of Central Asia. I think Singapore won't be much relevant to this discussion, but Central Asia does face a lot of the issues that many of you have described today, especially Kazakhstan, the country I'm from. It's a huge country, 9th biggest country in the world. But one of the biggest problems that you will find in Kazakhstan is very low population density. Like I think Kazakhstan is very close to Canada, for example, in terms of population density. That's over 200th position in the world. So you have a huge geographical region with very few people. Yes, a relatively comparatively healthy economy for an emerging market, pre-COVID, of course, but then quite a few challenges in terms of startup ecosystem. To be honest, I would say Kazakhstan startup ecosystem in its infancy. For a long time, startups have succeeded not because there was support, but despite having any infrastructure. I think I've heard similar remarks from many entrepreneurs in many African countries. For example, there was a long time, for example, in the market where that notion was completely in a different in a different kind of stage. There weren't many accelerators. There weren't many professional investors. Right now, the situation is improving. There are very positive news this year that I'm happy to share. I'm very hopeful about, but generally there are many struggles for, I would say, Central Asian, generally technopreneurs that they will face in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. So thanks everyone. So I have a couple of questions. Maybe we'll do it like that. I'll ask a question, and then those who would like to share your wisdom could answer. So I know that in all of your geographies, startups take a slightly different track to go global. Could you like share when do they go global, like at pre-seed, seed, Series A, or maybe some growth stages, and what geographic markets startups attack in your geography? And yeah, so I don't know who would like to start.
Maybe I can share my thoughts, like quite simple. As we in Chile, we are a small country. Of course, we want to test the startup with the closest possible customer in order to see if the business model or the technology is actually working to solve that specific solution. But what we say is that we need to support startups that they were born global since the beginning, without thinking into frontiers. Of course, we need to consider opening a new company in different countries, or use, I don't know, Delaware as a headquarter in order to keep on growing the startups in the globe. But we are trying to set that mindset into all the startups that we support. If you start by finding just an opportunity in a specific niche, in a specific small market such as Chile, it's not going to be enough. At least that should be a rule for those countries that are quite small in terms of population, which means any quite specific market, it will be not big enough. So my answer to your question, Dennis, will be since the beginning. If the second customer is not in Chile, that's perfect. If the third country is not in Chile, that's perfect. Of course, it will always depend on the business model, but for us, it should be since the beginning. That's my answer.
Okay, and speaking of the countries they typically attack, so what are the usual suspects like Brazil, Mexico, Argentina?
It's also depending in the industry, but from Chile to the top countries are always Peru, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico. Not taking into consideration the U.S. because of course it's an attractive market to a lot of startups. But in Latin America, that's the order: Peru, Colombia, Argentina, and Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So who would be in the next?
Thank you, David, for sharing that. I would like to offer an alternative to that with unique intricacies of, for example, Kazakhstan, Central Asia in general, but specifically Kazakhstan. I would say it's important to start local because it's such a huge geographical region on one hand. On the other hand, there are areas, obviously niches, where there is lack of competition compared to countries where population density is very high. And obviously there are kind of various competitors from different countries, looking at that market. Kazakhstan has a few large cities that have relatively people with relatively high incomes. For example, Almaty, the capital, Nur Sultan, the various big cities on the south that offer a good playground, a good place and an opportunity to test your services, to work out the kinks, to make sure there is a good product market fit. And on the other hand, Kazakhstani entrepreneurs are very, very adventurous. They were born there, they have nomadic origins, and the moment they start something, they say, "Oh, it's time to start attacking South." Attacking is a good word, by the way. Start attacking Southeast Asia, which I think is a very good market for Central Asian entrepreneurs to expand to. I think it's one of the perfect places for various reasons. I'm happy to share those. But I think it's important not to jump the gun too early. It's important to test that out. It's important to make use of these markets. Granted, these are markets that won't last forever. Granted, these are small markets that the entrepreneurs will have to expand to grow. There's no way around it. But these are perfect training spots. For example, like Indonesia has a huge population, but for example, nominal GDP per capita is around 3,000-4,000. Kazakhstan has nominal GDP per capita, much smaller economy, but a nominal GDP per capita around 14, 15. So that means in these big cities, in these pockets, there is depth of the market for very early stage companies. After that, I would say, having been there, learning your mistakes, it's time to go and attack a much larger market.
But at this point, you need to have like it's the second year of your company will like you reach $1 million, $2 million in revenue, and then expand globally. So,
reaching these levels of revenue without losing time might be difficult. So I would say, in terms of stage, you asked a good question. What kind of stage would be? From my experience, from companies in my portfolio, I do sometimes I help out in terms of one-to-one mentoring to aspiring entrepreneurs. I would say from that experience, I would say after having raised a quality seed round, that's the time when you would go to the next market outside of Kazakhstan. Generally, angel round would be rather small in Central Asia, on the smallish side, but there is now infrastructure to raise a quality seed round, 500,000, $1 million, even perhaps, and then I think it's the perfect time to use that capital to expand and set up shop in a deep market, and then perhaps raise Series E or Series A at a much higher valuation from, for example, funds in Singapore, where they wouldn't necessarily look at a tech company that is exclusively exposed to Central Asia. We are one of the few funds that would, but generally they wouldn't. But the moment there is a good geographical diversification in terms of revenue sources, and a big part of that is from Southeast Asia, then raising funds from Singapore with a much higher multiple would become an option.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe-
Claudia?
Sorry. What are you saying, Claudia? Yeah, I think yeah, actually our previous speaker raised a lot of very interesting points. I was trying to think like, what am I going to say about this? Because I think there's so many angles in which we can approach it. So obviously, first of all, in Africa, it really depends on, you know, where you are. Like we have a lot of very extremely small markets, countries maybe with 500,000 inhabitants, and then we have, you know, the close to 200 million. So where do you start again? But you know, I think a lot of interesting points were made, but maybe what I want to speak on is that, you know, how do we actually approach growth, you know, in many countries in Africa versus perhaps in, you know, other more developed places. And maybe to start by, a lot of times when we look at the type of solutions, many startups are still trying to solve basic needs, right? So there used to be a bit of a joke. I'm not saying it's entirely true, but it kind of spoke on, you know, in the Western world, people are building solutions like things your mom used to do for you, but doesn't want to do for you anymore, such as, you know, your food ordering applications, for example. Whereas in Africa, and I think a lot of emerging markets, we are solving issues that the government was supposed to do for us, but never provided. And I think a couple of comments were actually mentioned based on that before. So when we look at, you know, scaling, a lot of times for many startups that we have on the continent, which by the way, we don't really have a lot of like pure technology innovation. So we have tech-enabled companies, but most of the innovation actually sits in the business model. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to look at the Western world in the first place, right? Because you would be attacking a whole different set of issues. So then we have, okay, where do we scale in Africa? So as I mentioned before, we have a lot of, you know, different complexities and market shocks as well. So you can be looking at a great market and tomorrow there's election time and a lot of unrest, and well, what do we do then? So we've actually kind of seen that quite a bit of startups, they might be looking at, you know, the next bigger market in Africa, but a lot of African startups are also focused on that M2M, like emerging market to emerging market scaling, right? So where you're sitting in a place such as South Africa, actually South Africa is very different compared to other, you know, countries on the continent, but there might be a country in Latin America that has more or less similarities in terms of, you know, customer, consumer behavior, the type of profiles that they're attacking. So you'll find actually that quite a bit of startups are looking not necessarily always to scale within African countries, but to actually scale across different emerging markets to other emerging markets that are similar. And then maybe just like one last point, also related to, you know, growth and scaling. You know, in you know, Silicon Valley, we look a lot at this like blitz scaling concept, right? So it's really about whoever goes first to market gets the most users, et cetera, et cetera. You know, African economies, because they're so high friction, you know, it's really scarce in terms of, you know, capital, business. We have to take into account the regulatory, talent infrastructure is not really readily available, currency issues. As I mentioned before, markets are most exposed to shocks. So I think for a lot of investors on the continent, because of these challenges that we're facing, we're not actually necessarily interested in the startup that wants to do this very fast blitz scaling, because we understand that this might happen and, you know, everything might be ruined. So what we actually look at when, you know, there's a startup coming in is really about not so much the blitz scaling, but how can you kind of, you know, go step by step and do each step very well, but also don't do that with those big, you know, investment rounds. Those big investment rounds comes with a lot of very unrealistic expectations, especially in Africa. So we tend to invest smaller ticket rounds bit by bit, where the startup can kind of like prove also bit by bit that this is working. And because you have less expectations, I think it also allows many businesses to be a bit more agile and lean and to actually deal with those market shocks when and if they happen.
Yeah, so, and is it fair to say that typically the startups even grow, so they naturally grow and try to build some business in the country they started in the first place, and then maybe when they reach like $1 million or so, they raise incremental capital and attack the next country. Yeah, so moving a little bit slower, but more stable, right?
Yeah, more stable. I think more calculated because it is more risky, right? As I said, like tomorrow you can be winning Nigeria, and then tomorrow the government of Nigeria decides that now you cannot use motorcycles for commercial use, and you just launch your logistical platform using motorcycles. So what do you do then? And unfortunately, we see a lot of those things happen. And I'm saying all of these things, and I'm not really trying to scare anyone in this, because I do think there's a lot of very great opportunities in the process. But I think it's also very important that for entrepreneurs, both in Africa, but also from outside wanting to come in, that, they are very conscious about these challenges, and that a different approach is perhaps required if you try to launch and scale a business in anywhere in Africa versus if you would go to, let's say, Israel, for example.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe Dmitry, could you share your experience how startups which start from Baltics, for example, move forward at what stage, what the typical paths for they take?
So I believe that it's not so straightforward, and I believe at least we have to separate here as B2B and B2C startups, right? So, so B2B, I think that we have a lot of really great shared service centers in Baltics, really big international companies. So if you're able to sell, to let's say a local office of Western Union or Barclays or Revolut in your local country. So for me, it counts like as international client, right? So, and it helps you to expand to different office or even maybe knock on the HQ's doors in some cases. So for B2B, I believe it's okay to start local, and we have some really good platforms like fintechs, where Lithuania is very famous in Europe for the regulation. So startups start here working with B2B clients, but in general, so it's B2C. So I think that it's not worth spending like the time on trying to test hypothesis on local market, whereas like total Baltic population is something like 6 million people, right? So so if startups come and say, hey, but we need just only a small amount of money, and we test the hypothesis, and we move forward to UK. So usually they say, or US, or so usual suspects can be also Scandinavia or Germany. So we say, so go there where there's the way you can make this business happen, and even don't try it in Baltics, because like you'll just waste the money and efforts and time, everything. So don't do that. But if the teams really want to do that, they usually don't get investment, because I think there were quite some successful investments into teams starting from local markets in this area, and and not going forward. So I believe this is a standard, and I believe also that this is also maybe there are more B2B startups in Baltics for this reason. So people don't have understanding about the most of the teams don't have understanding of working and making products for larger markets. And I believe the same, they don't have the necessary expertise to coach them. So I believe in this terms, like Russia or Ukraine, Belarus with diaspora in US and Israel, of course, like they have a big advantage, and they can teach Baltics, in some cases, like Baltics can teach a lot, about entrepreneurship maybe, and about how to in small countries start so many startups and get so much investment. But in some cases, I believe we have to learn from really finding the ways to to big market from the early beginning, and have the support there.
Yeah, thank you. So, and it's now it's time to talk about the U.S. market and Israel. So, Guy or Adam, who would like to take the lead and share your experience?
I don't mind taking the lead. I don't know if it's fine with you. Well, actually, we can both join, I think.
Well, I don't mind for you to start. Okay, you're doing it so well, so why ruin it now? Okay, just go ahead, please.
Sure, but yes, indeed, Dennis. For Israelis, United States market is the ultimate, the default choice. Basically, historically, it happened because of a very simple reason. The first venture funds that entered and penetrated the Israeli market were United States American funds. Therefore, they were expecting that local technology will be migrated and basically will be moved to United States. And because of that reason, by default, when entrepreneurs, founders start starting a business here, they automatically think about United States. They automatically thinking about moving to United States, and I understand that at least a couple of years they will be required to move there and physically be present there. I can tell you that from my side, for example, when I'm reviewing startups and, and sometimes I just ask a question, when are we planning to move to the United States? And if I hear like mumbling or I don't know, maybe later, some kind of uncertainty, I automatically reject this startup because, for us, it's kind of non-go. That's from one side. From the other side, once again, in the United States, there is a huge network of Israelis, and it's very common for Israelis to be there, either Silicon Valley, New York, or California at all. So for Israel, it's kind of it's not very difficult. We also speak in Israel. We learn English from very young age, so for us it's not a big deal. But I would say that sometimes some startups do begin their sales in Israel and then move to the United States. There is such a scenario. Sometimes it's a successful scenario, but I would say it's not a very common. In most cases, even if startups do that, basically, once again, the first question when they go to a venture capitalist will be, okay, guys, so you launched your sales in Israel, very nice. You proved your product market fit. You demonstrate that there are some customers that want you. When do you move to the United States? That will be basically the very first question.
And as I heard, that the typical track for you guys is like you raise some initial capital from angel investors, and start. One of the founders, typically CEO, hops on the plane and flies to the United States and leverage the network he or she has and start selling there.
Yes, that is very correct. I would add that the CTO hops on plane and flies basically to Russia to start and outsource the development. That's Adam knows very well as well. So in Israel, sometimes when you approach a startup and you ask, okay, are you an Israeli startup? It's sometimes even difficult to answer because you have the developers team based in Russia, and then you have sales in United States, and then you have founders born and immigrated from Israel. So is it Israeli startup or not? I can give you many examples. Starting from WeWork, Adam Neumann is an Israeli, and basically he came up with the idea of shared co-working space from kibbutz, where he grew, and ending with Viber, whose founder is one of the founders, Igor Magazinik, is also Russian-speaking immigrant, and he has an R&D team in Belarus and sales over the world, and was acquired by a Japanese company. In Israel, it's very difficult to define this is core Israeli startup. It's global. We by default from the very inception we are looking globally. We all are open globally. We are easily work with different companies around the globe, and saying that we are Israeli startup and we are now going to United States. For us, it's kind of a little awkward because we are a startup and we hire people where it's cheaper to hire people, and we sell where people will basically pay us. That's by default, and the borders and countries, it's like less important in some way. But yes, if we want to get funded, by default, we should start selling in the United States. now we have more, you know, Chinese venture funds and some European venture funds, some Russian expressing interest, but still primary focus is United States. And still, you know, when you're looking into a startup, the first question will be, okay, what are your US-based revenues? That's a little bit about us.
Yeah, thanks. Adam, I would like to ask you, so you also had experience investing as an angel investor yourself, or maybe you could add something to Guy's points?
Because just from the angel investor's perspective, it's the same as the VC perspective. It's only difference is, you know, eventually how much money you put and what stage, etc., etc. So that's where we are. Okay. Again, the current ecosystem in Israel is quite clear. So the angel investors invest in the very early stage companies like pre-seed stage, right? And the VCs invest in seed and A. And by the way, recently the average investment from VC has been growing from $1 million to $3 million. We're talking about seed investment. Okay, so so there is a gap between angel investors and VCs, and smart angel investors can play on this gap. Okay, using this gap, like investing between a couple of $100,000 and up to $3 million. So, but I do agree, when going back to the Israeli market and the Israeli startups, when they start on the Israeli market, I totally agree with Dmitry. Perception, because we have the same situation as in the Baltic countries. We're a small country, 8 million people. It's a small market, okay? And if you're a B2B company, so you can definitely do business. You know, most of the I split it again, as Dmitry said, to B2B and the B2C company. B2C companies, there is nothing to do in Israel. They automatically go to US. US is the default market for most of the Israeli countries, okay? After that, Europe, after that, the rest of the world, okay? So, so the path is over there, the best practices over there. We all know how to do that, okay? It's not, it's complex, but simple, because we have a lot of experience and a lot of different startups did that already. So this is one thing. All right. The second thing is about the B2B companies. It's an interesting story. You, as a B2B company, you can definitely do some business, start doing some business in Israel, and you can actually target international clients. That we have a lot of branches here and representations of the big international corporations here in Israel, and you can grow inside out. Okay, you can start with that, and then you can go to the international markets again, US, Europe, and sell there through the same channels. Okay. So we also, again, in order to emphasize that, we also have a great, you know, a Jewish community all around the world. Okay, have a rather big influence on the markets, under the market economy. Okay, so we're using this networking very intensive way, in a very good way. All right. So for Israeli market, again, for the Israeli startups, again, it's a very natural to go to the US, to go to Europe and work there. As an angel, well, I always invest in the startup. They have an international potential. Okay, that's as simple as that. Okay, so the startup that's working locally, I don't consider them as the startups. It's like a businesses. Okay, you want to go to open the local shop. It could be very profitable, but the value of that could be insufficient. Okay, so there is no, you can treat it as a business, but you can't treat it as a startup. And we know that one of the key success factors of the good startup is the value of the startup. Okay, so if you have only local representation, even if you do a lot of money, okay, your value as a startup and the exit point could be very low because you're active only locally. We're talking about Israel right now. Okay. But if you're a global startup, it's a different ballgame. So that's where we are. Now for the rest of you guys, you know, if you want to go to Israel, okay, so my personal suggestion is, okay, if you want thinking about going to Israel with your startups, okay, so my personal suggestion is go here just to raise the money, okay? There is no other reason to come here. Again, it's a small country. It's a very, now the thing that Claudia said is very also interesting because she talked about regulations. Okay, we are very regulated country, so we have a lot of regulations, and these regulations are supporting the innovation. We're calling ourselves a startup nation. Okay, so that's why, and the government is very much involved in all the ecosystem and supporting all the ecosystem. By the way, it's all started with the government. Without the Israeli government, nothing of this could have happened. Okay, Guy was telling about the US funds coming to Israel, but before they came to Israel, there was an infrastructure of the governmental support, very wide, very active, and government invested a lot of money in the early 60s. Okay, we're talking like way back before we know about startups, etc., etc. All right, so of course you can go here in terms of regulations, and if you want to raise money, of course you're welcome to approach Israeli ecosystem, but you have to, again, to show that you are a global company targeting global markets, international markets, that you have a good tech team, and all the other aspects, a basic package that you have to have as a successful start.
Yeah, and the last minor comments on Israel is that you guys have a lot of innovation and actually startups starting in the army. Is that so?
Yeah, well, I started my career in an army, okay, as an IT guy. I was educated in Israel Defense Forces. I was serving in technological elite unit, dealing with IT and cyber issues. And I'm not only one, okay, like I believe that 30 to 40% of the Israeli founders came from that area where started the professional careers in the Israel Defense Forces. Okay, we are very much supporting. Again, looking from the military perspective, again, we are a very small country, so we don't have a human resources. What we do have are brains, and we do have a technology, and we use it a lot when we're talking about the defense, when we're talking about military aspects, when we're talking about all the reasons that we have. And and I know, everybody knows that we're not unstable. Israel is not located in the stable area. We have from time to time some encounters, some wars, and etc. So we're definitely supporting using technology for the defense. And these people who are trained and gaining experience in the Israeli army go out after they've actually completing their service and go to the open market, the civil market, and doing magnificent things over there. Okay, well, I think that 40% of the technology that we have came originally were designed this way or another in the Israeli Defense Forces.
Cool.
I would add, Adam, that basically when I interview startups, I always ask the founders what they have done in the army. I don't know what about you, but I guess you're doing the same. And when people say that they have been like in Shmona Matayim or other intelligence units, it basically adds to the value of the founder.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't ask him. I just know. Okay, I'm not asking him. I know everybody. Okay, so it's eventually we're from the same unit. Okay, it's like 2 years before 3 years after. Okay, so it's the same. It's a small community within a big, but very strong community within a rather big Israeli ecosystem. By the way, I would like to say another example, Dennis, about an Israeli startup which started in Israel in B2C, which is an interesting story. I don't know if you're familiar with Mobileye. Are you familiar with
Mobileye? Yeah, I know them.
Yeah, so Mobileye, it's eventually the biggest Israeli, the most successful Israeli startup in terms of the biggest exit. In 2017, it was acquired by Intel for $15 billion. Okay, and it's like amazing. Yeah, it's like the first startup. The second, like I think it's Mellanox that was acquired by Nvidia for $6 or $7 billion. Okay, so this is the top Israeli startup. Now this specific company, which was started in 1999, okay, was established in 1999, like years ago. When they moved to the B2C, they started in Israel. Okay, so it's an interesting thing when one of the biggest and most successful Israeli startup has started the business, the B2C business. They started as a B2B, but then they moved to the B2C model, started in Israel, and the Israel for years has been the main market for the B2C. All right, And then we have a $15 billion company. Okay, that's a good example.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, time-wise, I'd like to spend not more than 20 minutes of your time for this panel discussion. So I ask the most intriguing question to founders. So suppose you're not from your local market, so for example, coming from CIS or maybe other geographies, and would like to land in your countries. What should they account for? And especially one of the intriguing questions is if I would like to raise capital landing in your country, what should I account for? So should I mimic any way to the local, or and what's the typical path in this? So maybe David, you can start.
Sure. Maybe I'm biased of the type of work that we do in Startup Chile, of course, because what we do is that we do attract people from all over the world to come to Chile and use Chile as a platform to grow, right? So my guess that we are using, we are doing several startups from all over the world to start the growth process in the international market as Chile as a second market, right? So in that terms, I would like to say that it's, for us, it's always really important, not just for us, but all the VC funds based in here. First is, why the region? We have been in touch with several startups in the application processes, and a lot of people are actually asking us, hey, why should I go to Chile? I mean, the founders, good founders that we support, they need to do the job. They need to find out which are the best markets. As you might know, Chile, we have one of the biggest copper mines in the world, which means that if you are a mining startup solution founder, you might be interested in come to here, not just Chile, because also Peru and a few other countries, Mexico as well. So try to somehow tackle problems that they're based and present in the market that you are arriving. That's something really important for us. And something really important also is if they already found any specific connections. We liked a lot several startups, maybe from Europe, of different countries, that they say, you know what, I'm going there. I'm not just going because you will support me. We are going anywhere. Whenever they're completely convinced that they are willing to come, those are the startups that we will, like, it's more likely that we are going to support, because they already took the decision that Latin America is an interesting market, right? So I think those are the first things that we take into consideration whenever the startups are coming to Chile, and we can see that represented not just in us, but also in the different VC funds that we have in Chile.
Yeah, and speaking of the VCs, so what they typically look for? So the startup needs to have some revenue traction in the region, or I don't know, have a local co-founder, or what would be like the ideas people need to keep in mind to raise money in Latin America?
Yeah, the easiest way, at least in Chile, and Chile as a door entrance to Latin America, is, as you were mentioning, opening a company in Chile. That's quite simple. It's not a need, but it's something that is really simple, that they don't even need to come to Chile. They can do it in the Chilean embassies all over the world, or of course they can come, and with a soft landing process, they will be ready to go really fast. As that's an asset of Chile, because you can actually create a company in few times and not much effort. And whenever you have a Chilean company or Chile-backed company, it will be way easier, because, of course, it's not a requisite or a requirement of the local VC funds. But as I mentioned before, the Corfo, this organization that it's somehow based in the public sector, we are putting more money to the VC funds. We are doing matching funds. So some of the rules of these funds are set by the government, which means that if you need to have a company incorporated in Chile, of course, do it, because if not, you might raise capital, but it will be fewer money, for you to raise. And if the percentage of the companies that they are actually raising funds in Latin America is not that high, it will be even lower if you are not incorporated in Chile, just with that specific sector. And of course, there's some limits. as we are mostly supporting startups in early stage, not us like at Startup Chile, but our ecosystem. If you have a lot of revenues, maybe some of the VC funds that are backing the government, it won't be able for them to invest. I can maybe, if you can put in the comment of this talk, send you a few requirements of the specific VC funds that they're backing the government. So if the specific startups are willing to come to Chile, they would know the rules that the government is setting depending in the amount that they will raise. I will happily share that with you, Dennis, so we can share it to the audience.
Yeah, okay, guys. And speaking of the hiring a local person, maybe the first sales, or do typically people like one of the co-founders land into Chile? Because there is a lot of both cultural and language gap in Latin America. You can't use only English to sell on your market. So maybe a couple of words about this.
We completely recommend to hire a local, specifically whenever you are launching the sales funnel directly to this market. We have seen we are really different in terms of culture. And if you're B2B, it's really different in compared to a lot of things that we have seen. So it's always good if you hire a local, it could be a country manager or somebody in charge of the sales funnel, at least at the beginning. Of course, it's always great if the founder is coming so they can know and get involved with the culture, but at least that commercial side of the company should be always local. And we aren't that different between countries. Of course, we have different local cultures between Mexico and Chile and so on. We need to take that into consideration, but isn't that much compare Mexico to Chile that you compare Russia to Chile. That's huge, right? So it's a fewer gap if you hire a local. At least the Chileans that they're going different parts of Latin America as well, they're trying to have those specific partnerships in each country to make it simple for them. Yeah, that's a good point, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. Dmitry, maybe you can share your experience of startups landing in Lithuania, and then if they would like to raise their seed rounds or maybe get some government granting. So what should they account for?
So yes, so I believe that Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, all of them are trying to market countries as a gateway to European Union for Russian-speaking market, for Turkey, for Middle East, and some or my friends, investors, and those committees approving those government government grants or government programs like startup visas or something like that, some onboarding programs. So there are thousands of applications, at least in Estonia, and in Lithuania also quite a big amount of startups wanting to apply, and I believe the conditions are quite good. However, looking from VC's perspective, and so they want those companies not only to have their registration address in, let's say, Vilnius or Tallinn, but they also want the team be present on site, because the investment is not like just you put money and see what's happening, but it's like 5 to 7 years engagement with the company. So they want founders to be present. They don't want founders to have the legal address and then move back to their country or some other country and so on. So I believe that those who stay and at least have some part of the business in Baltics, let's say it can be development team, it can be founders like being present here and traveling from here. I believe that they have chances for success. Otherwise, venture capitalists are not ready to work with those founders because.
A really specific question to you is in those emerging countries, oftentimes it's the hardest money to raise is like the first $300,000. Is it possible for pre-revenue or early revenue startup, if they would are accepted to Startup Wise guys or other accelerator, is it possible afterwards to raise those money? or they should look for money in their local markets for this transition and may raise only later on. So.
Yeah, I believe this is our mission actually. So our mission is to bring those startups from the local market to international area, to expose them, to teach some international game rules, and it's we kind of have a commitment. So they will raise the round after Accelerator. So no, so we're helping and them to do that. Of course, not everybody can achieve that because of different kind of reasons, traction, cultural differences. Still they too early or some other reasons. But in general, we believe this should happen. And we're doing everything it could happen. So we're exposing them to international VCs, and I think that we have some really great stories from Russian founders, Ukrainian founders, Kazakh founders, Turkish founders raising rounds from European VCs. So it's happening, So, but it's not an easy job, It's a bit of, I can't say it's dirty job, but it's a tough job, It's much easier to invest already in startups which. From your local markets, probably, or from teams within from usual suspects geographies.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dmitry. I'll just maybe you already shared some vision on that, but maybe you could add some light on. Well, if a founder would like to raise from from Asian investors, so. What should they?
Absolutely. So since we're talking about interesting geographies, obviously Southeast Asia is where I've been based for the last close to 10 years now, is an interesting geography for a lot of startups, tech companies, as well as investors. It's a $3 trillion market. The internet economy has reached 100 billion. It's growing at a tremendous pace. I think what makes Southeast Asia interesting is the fact that mobile technology penetration is one of the highest in the world. That creates fertile ground for specifically B2C startups, which is a very tough field, to be in many markets. But Southeast Asia has many niches that can be attacked, as you mentioned. But also, there are quite a few early adopters in Southeast Asia that creates an opportunity for a number of B2b startups to penetrate this market. A number of European, American, Israeli companies are doing that successfully. Also, the market obviously attracted a lot of international capital after certain success stories have started popping up. For example, Grab, a regional, marketplace, I would call it, not a ride-hailing platform anymore, is valued at 15 billion. Gojek, an Indonesian alternative, is valued close to that. So a number of company. After that happened, a lot more capital kind of landed in Southeast Asia. And I'm not going to talk about China and India. I mean, just Southeast Asia, because these are entirely different regions that we could take hours about talking. And this is just to build a bit of context into my advice, right? So these funds, these are local funds, some government funds, as well as international funds like Sequoia, that have established a specific presence to specifically get exposure to these markets. So I would say the best way to attract investments from them is to obviously get a piece of the market, right? To demonstrate that your company, your service, your product can successfully operate in this market. And if you do, obviously these people looking at exposure to these markets obviously will look at you in a different light. And there's in Southeast Asia, especially in Singapore, there are tremendous opportunities to fundraise. Like Temasek, one of the Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, that does substantial investments very successfully in growth stage tech companies. There are many very successful early stage funds, including Quest Ventures, for example, which right now has open exposure to Kazakhstan, which I'm very happy about. There are a number of, so the good thing about Southeast Asia, it's at this stage where the whole vertical of fundraising is covered. You have quality early stage, you have quality growth stage. I mean, late stage is still growing. Late stage, a lot of funds go to earn funds, for example, to lead or co-fund, but all the verticals are covered. So yeah, get exposure to Southeast Asia, and the best way to get exposure to Southeast Asia, and I obviously I recommend that to a lot of Kazakhstani entrepreneurs, and that's relevant to any entrepreneur penetrating Southeast Asia. I would say it's mass localization. Of course, it's globalization, but it's kind of mass localization because these markets, they all speak different languages, like they all have different cultures, but they also, there is a saying here, it's the same, but different. They're all the same, but a little bit different, and really will do a lot of benefit to hire locally and to, in every market to localize your service so it can definitely penetrate. It's not that difficult to do, but it really will help. But also maybe one last thing, be wary of regulation. These markets are regulated, of course, like any other market, but the context or the paradigm of Southeast Asian economies is what is not expressly allowed, it is prohibited, right? So, I mean, if you're looking of whether or not to acquire a license, it's in many countries, like you would say, if it's not expressly prohibited, it's allowed. Now, here it's different, right? Here, you're better off just making sure you have, you do and double check. If your product is borderline license or no license, just go and acquire the license. Spend that money, go and acquire it. Because, I mean, I've seen situations where people come in, don't do that, they get screwed, or they win their competition because they have done that step. They are, and obviously they can, I don't know, go to the regulator and demonstrate that difference, or generally regulator would keenly support companies that are respective of the local law. So if you ask for my sense, that would be it.
Yeah. Okay, Claudia, maybe you can also give a couple of words of, because I'm not sure if there is a lot of startups expanding to Africa, and if they do, so what's...
Yes, they are, because they say Africa is the next market to look at. So I think I spoke quite a bit about the scary stuff, but maybe to also emphasize on why should you be looking to Africa. I think first of all, we have a lot of challenges, and I think every entrepreneur knows that means that there's a whole lot of opportunities to address. So I think there's no shortage of that. I think another interesting thing is that markets are really opening up. And it's really since the past couple of years that it's becoming more and more easy for Africans to travel between African countries, but also for foreigners to actually have access to a lot of markets. So I think that is a very interesting opportunity. I think in many ways we are building industries. So as much as I think it's interesting for your tech companies to come, I think it's also very interesting for people that have innovative ideas in maybe some non-tech type of solutions as well. And I think that in many ways, what we have seen with startups coming here or coming to the continent, they have this advantage of this first mover advantage, let's say, in many different fields. And we are in a position where, as I mentioned before, we do a lot of business model innovation. I think there's a lot more room for technology innovation. And I think especially for those coming outside of Africa that were, as we say, a bit more privileged in having, certain educations and exposures, I think it's very interesting for them to come back. Very quickly, I think some considerations. Number one thing that, I always tell the startups that we support in their expansion into Africa is really, I think the first step before looking at all of those structural issues is really to be conscious of the environment that you actually want to work in. And be also respectful to that environment as well. I mean, Africa, we have a lot of different cultures, languages, histories, and I think not only is it important to, for the entrepreneur to understand more or less at least the basics of how that works, but also, as you're doing business, I think there's a lot of people and organizations that really want to help and to support and are very open. But I feel like the startups that we have seen that came in bulldoze without taking any time to really try to understand what context are they actually operating in right now, were the ones that also left quite quickly as well. I think in terms of raising investment, we do have, I would say, it's very easy to raise kind of like pre-seed, early seed. It's very easy to raise like, your Series A plus, but I think anywhere in between, there's quite a big of a gap. So, either you raise a little or you raise like a whole lot, but if you go in between, I would actually really recommend to look at investors, outside of Africa. A lot of interesting investors there. And, we're talking a bit, we heard about the, Israeli community and network in places such as the US. And I think a lot of times what people forget is that we have a whole lot of African diaspora that have done extremely well. For example, in the US, we have, many Nigerians that I think I read a couple of articles that they're one of the highest performing immigrants now in terms of education and all of those things. And I think that we go very fast to your typical VC, but there's this whole other group of people that are still connected with the continent that, are really showing this increase in wanting to invest back. And actually, it is said that in terms of, development and aid money, that very soon they are predicting that, the diaspora will be a bigger investor back into the continent than these, typical institutions and aid money. So I think that there's, beyond your typical VCs, to also look at those communities such as our Israeli friends have done very well and understood very early. So I think we can definitely learn from that as well.
Yeah. Speaking of Israeli experience, so could you also add up on something like the tricks or things to keep in mind if you would like to raise money from Israeli VCs? We have already talked about that you need to attack the US market, but are there any limitations you need to encounter?
Well, I'll begin, but if you are not Israeli startup and planning to raise from Israeli VC, just don't. If you're planning to lend in Israel and to get funded here, don't. First of all, we have enough startups here. The market is really crowded, and the competition here is very tough. That's one. Second, as Adam very correctly mentioned, if still you are very keen to raise here, you should be very, very international. You should have sales in many countries, many continents, preferably starting with United States and other countries. And you should have a very good explanation why you are trying to raise from Israeli venture fund and not your local venture fund, basically the fund from the country where you are established. So in our case, I would not recommend to startups to come here, not to basically explore the market, not to raise funds, just, go globally, but not in Israel. That's, my very honest reply, and sorry, but that's how I see it. Adam, microphone back to you.
Thank you, Guy. Well, in general, Guy is right. Okay, so there is no flashy news from my end, but and the reason for that is very interesting. As innovative we are, in startup nation we are very regarding investing in the foreign companies in the emerging markets. Okay, Israel is, by the way, very keen to invest in US companies. Okay, Israeli funds very interested in US, maybe in some European companies, but in the rest of the world, they're not going to happen. And that's a very interesting story. And it's a very, very conservative approach that takes place from the beginning of the early stages of the whole industry. And that's how we are. Okay. I hope that eventually it's going to change. And I tell you the reason why I think it's going to change, because Guy said that we have a lot of startups. This is correct. We have a lot of startups. We have an incubation talent incubation from the army. We have good universities. We have a best practice. We have an infrastructure to grow, to incubate founders and entrepreneurs. And we're born entrepreneurs, many of us. Okay, most all of us are born as entrepreneurs. Okay, it's in our blood. Okay, some people say we get it with the mother's milk. All right, so eventually, but eventually the situation is right now in Israel, I believe, this is my personal belief, that we have currently more money than the good startups. Okay, the good deal for the startups. Okay,
Adam, don't disclose. The startups will come now.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, go ahead. That's it. This is the biggest secret. Okay, I just reviewing the scoop. Okay,
we are reviewing the big secret.
That's what you've been waiting for all the time. Okay, so eventually, what we have now, we have more. I believe we have more money available for the investment than good, really good, solid premium startups. Right. So I believe eventually, it will be penetration of the foreign startups to the local market because of the demand. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in immediately. Okay, it's going to be not a revolutionary process, but an evolutionary process. Okay, and I would suggest, I'm a businessman that before I'm a venture capitalist. Okay, so I would suggest any company that considers to go to Israel, there are several reasons and several steps you need to do. So the first thing, you can go for Israel to raise money. Okay, again, we have money, but it's very hard to have them, as Guy said, correctly said. Okay, it's almost impossible. Let's put it this way at this point for now. The second thing, if you really want to go, so you need to make you can use Israel as a bridge country. And by bridge country, I'm saying that when you want to go to the US market, sometimes it's a very expensive thing to do. And it takes resources and time, and maybe and I'm talking, let's say, for countries from Russia, for startups from Russia or Ukraine or former, Soviet Union republics. If you want really, you can use Israel as a bridge to go and expand to the US market or the European market, because Israeli startups have a high value on this market, okay? So if you really want to do that, what you need to do, you need to convert yourself from the Russian startup to the Israeli startup, okay? So you actually need to come to live in Israel, or at least having a co-founder or a co-founder from Israel, okay? Because one of the biggest reasons that Israeli investors don't give money, don't invest in the foreign startups, is because of the people. Israeli investors invest in the talents. They know the people. We're a small country, small community. We can track the people record. We know everybody. We know where they come from. It's very transparent. It's very small, very transparent, very traceable. Okay. So when the founder comes to me, we know a lot about this founder even before he opens his mouth. Okay. So that's how it works. It's a very small and very boutique approach. Okay. Where for the outsider, it's a different ball game. So they need to come here, to live here, to become part of the establishment, or at least have a local partner, a local co-founder, okay? So let's say Russian startup can still have the R&D in Russia, okay? An African startup can have an R&D in Africa, because in Israel we have a problem we have a lack of talents, and the talents are very technical talents, are very expensive. As we speak, we have like 18,000 lack of 18,000 developers in Israel. That's why we go to Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and all the offshore countries and looking for more resources to hire, okay? So you can keep your R&D, you can keep your tech, but your business needs to be in Israel. And this is only by that, or you're moving your company here, okay? And only by that you can get money. There is a chance, okay, that you get an investment from Israel. From the governmental support point of view, okay, you have to be Israeli company. You have to hold an IP in Israel, okay. So this is where we are. So it's doable in theory, okay, but it's a very difficult task. It's a very difficult.
Yeah, guys, thanks for your insights. Maybe we start wrapping it up. Maybe like the final words, the call to action to those startups which are listening to us. So, what would you advise? What would you say to them?
I will start because I have to go soon. Sorry about it.
Yeah, sure.
But basically, I will be very short in my advice, guys. If you are a startup, just move yourself to the market you see as your target market. Okay, don't play with let's begin in our market and then we expand to other and blah 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 all this stuff. If you believe your target market is United States, just get a buy ticket and go to United States. If you believe your market is Europe, buy ticket, go to Europe, and so on. So from my side, and I'm once again telling from personal experience as previously a startupist, one of the smarter decisions was to just, to take myself and move to the United States and start developing my startup there. So my biggest advice to startups that want to basically go internationally is just to do it. Do it now, buy a ticket and go. That's a very short advice, and thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and
I think I'll just share the same advice. If you want to come to Africa, just take your ticket and go. But as I said, Africa is a very big continent. So I think it always also makes sense just to, reach out to, whoever it is on the continent, whether it's a startup, a VC, an incubator, an accelerator, just to get to know a little bit more and just learn about, the different countries, what works, what not, before you actually make that move. I think one thing is to have, presence and be able to say, oh, I made it to Africa. I think another thing is really to say I have reach, right? Like you made it to Africa and you were able to reach the clients you wanted to have, reach the people, impacted the communities you wanted to impact, maybe in the process, if that is also a goal that you have. So it's really for me about, reach over ticking off a box, I'm in Africa, because it now kind of sounds sexy to a lot of different, startups or investors to be there. And don't waste our money in the process, if we do decide to invest, please.
Okay. And by the way, I saw that there is investment forum in October. They are doing it online in Nigeria. So maybe this is something our listeners could keep in mind and maybe at least virtually visit it and look for themselves, talk to the people.
Perfect. Well, this is where I leave you as well. Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So I would really like to be on this to confirm for what the previous speaker said that actually true entrepreneurs don't play safe, so don't start from a local market unless it's obviously the best choice, and go to those markets from the first day where you see that there is a business opportunity. And I believe that this is the plan which most of VCs, good VCs, will accept and support.
Thank you, Dmitry. Does anyone else?
Allow me to leave a couple of notes to close up my participation. I just wanted to leave a few notes of encouragement for Kazakhstan entrepreneurs. I have started with discussing the issues, but I just wanted to share that over the past few years, the situation has improved quite a bit, especially in the earlier stage of things, starting with increased presence of early stage funds, growth of local early stage funds. One of them is, for example, a partnership between our university and Denis's fund. Our university in Kazakhstan has launched an early stage fund that I have co-invested together with. Quite a pleasant experience that was. Thank you very much. Also, the government has done quite a few strides to create local accelerators that at this stage, unfortunately, not all technopreneurs know about. But what I want to encourage everyone to do who is considering starting a technological company or in early stages of development, I would encourage to search them out and make full use of them. Also, this year, two very, very good accelerators have been launched. The Kazakhstan Digital Accelerator, that's done in partnership between our government and a successful Singapore early stage fund called Quest. And also there is an accelerator with 500 startups. Again, I've found through my personal experience that not many entrepreneurs know about it because it's all very new, but I would really, really encourage to find that out and make full use of that. Also, B2b is slightly easier, of course, in Kazakhstan, but there are still few early adopters. There are not that many as I would like to see. So, but that situation is improving. Anyone who's, that maybe perhaps if there is an opportunity, try to encourage, more early adoption among entrepreneurs from other sectors. And the lady from SeedStars has left, but I really love their motto. I've been in SeedStars. It's actually a great platform for early stage entrepreneurs. They say the saying, I think, goes, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. I think that's an old Mexican proverb or something. So please, Dennis, relay my thanks for that proverb. It really sits well with me. And thank you for arranging this.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights. And Adam, are you with us?
Well, I think that everybody said it all. Okay, you have to just focus on your market, analyze, learn. What I would say, my 5 cents, okay, is just treat your startup as a business. Okay, not an idea, not a technology, not a group of people. Okay, not a vision. Okay, just it's not only these things. Okay, these things are important, but you also start. So you should focus on the market when you can easily, two kind of markets. First of all, market in the early stages that you can easily penetrate, that will cost you less as you can in order to penetrate and do some growth or profits out of this market from one point. From the second point, focus on the market which is growing and we can bring value to your startup, because eventually in our industry, the value of the startup is very important. Sometimes we have startups that don't do any money, don't do any profits, okay? But they were growing in the right markets, right directions. They became a market leaders. With zero incomes, they become a unicorns, okay? So we know how the new economy works, okay? That's why you need to treat it like exactly like your business and not just only startup, okay? This is the very important tip that I give for everyone, okay? So every new entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a good final note. So remember, guys, startups is first of all, it's a business. Yeah, I also like this. Yeah, guys. So thanks everyone for joining us today. You liked our conversation. I hope people get a lot of insights, like really condensed in one place. And I will send over a follow-up email to all the participants and listeners of the video recording. So if any of you guys, the speakers would like to share info with the startups, please send me it over so that I put the information in this follow-up email. Yeah, and again, thanks everyone for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure.
Great webinar.
Bye.
Thank you, Daniel.